Imagine a world where the Middle East is not a fragmented chessboard of conflict, but the most stable economic powerhouse on Earth. Imagine Istanbul in 2026, not as a regional city, but as the New York of the East, where the call to prayer echoes through streets lined with gleaming skyscrapers and electric hover trams. Imagine a superpower spanning 3 continents, controlling nearly half the world's oil, where Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities have coexisted for a century without war. This isn't fantasy. This is what the world could have looked like if one decision had gone differently in 1914. Welcome to History Reforged. Today we ask, what if the Ottoman Empire never fell? To understand how history could have changed, we must first understand how it actually ended. By the dawn of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire was dying. Once the terror of Europe, stretching from Budapest to Baghdad, the sick man of Europe was hemorrhaging territory and drowning in debt. The Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913 had stripped the empire of its European possessions. Its economy was controlled by European creditors through the Ottoman Public Debt Administration, a humiliation for a state that had once laid siege to Vienna. The Young Turk Revolution of 1908 had promised reform. The Committee of Union and Progress, the CUP, took power promising to save the empire. But they were divided between centralists led by the ambitious Enver Pasha, who dreamed of a pan-Turkic empire stretching to Central Asia, and liberal decentralists who believed survival required granting autonomy to Arab provinces. The empire's fate was sealed in August 1914. 2 German warships, the Goeben and Breslau, evaded British pursuit and arrived at the Dardanelles. Enver Pasha saw opportunity. He transferred these ships to the Ottoman Navy, technically at least, and used the incident to push the empire into a secret alliance with Germany. In October 1914, the Ottoman Empire entered World War I. The results were catastrophic. While the victory at Gallipoli became legendary, the campaign in the Caucasus against Russia ended in disaster at Sarikamish, where tens of thousands froze to death. The British, seeking to break the empire, sponsored the Arab Revolt of 1916, promising an independent Arab kingdom in exchange for rebellion against the godless Turkish government. By October 1918, it was over. The Armistice of Mudros was unconditional surrender. The Treaty of Sèvres in 1920 carved up the empire like a carcass. France took Syria and Lebanon, Britain took Palestine and Iraq, Greece was awarded Smyrna. The Ottoman Sultanate was abolished in 1922, and Mustafa Kemal Ataturk declared the Turkish Republic in 1923. The Middle East we know today, its borders, its conflicts, its instability, was born from these ashes. But what if Enver Pasha had been overruled? What if Sultan Mehmed V, or a more cautious Grand Vizier, had looked at the exhausted empire and said no? What if the German ships had been interned, or simply refused entry? The logic of neutrality was compelling. The empire was exhausted from the Balkan Wars. Its army needed rebuilding, its economy needed recovery. By remaining neutral, the Ottomans could sell supplies to both sides, rebuild their treasury, and avoid the meat grinder of modern warfare. In our alternate timeline, this is exactly what happens. The guns of August 1914 never ring out over Ottoman territory. The British and French, focused on defeating Germany, have no desire to provoke a neutral Muslim giant that controls the routes to their colonial possessions in India and Asia. Most importantly, without an Ottoman enemy, there is no British-sponsored Arab revolt. Sharif Hussein of Mecca remains loyal, hoping to negotiate autonomy from a position of strength rather than rebellion. The empire's Arab provinces remain intact. By 1918, as the belligerents of Europe bleed themselves white, the Ottoman Empire stands preserved, its army intact, its economy beginning to recover, its territory undivided. The sick man of Europe has survived the night. Survival, however, is not enough. The empire must reform or die slowly anyway. In our timeline, the discredited centralists of the CUP lose power to the liberal decentralists, led by Prince Sabahattin. The empire begins a transformation into what historians might call the United States of the Near East, or the Ottoman Commonwealth. Arab provinces gain local parliaments and linguistic rights. Iraq, Syria, and the Hejaz become autonomous regions within the empire, loyal to the Sultan Caliph but governing their own affairs. The nationalities problem that destroyed the Austro-Hungarian Empire is solved through federalism, but the true transformation comes from beneath the sand. In the real timeline, Western oil companies seized Middle Eastern oil through concessions that gave them nearly all the profits. In our alternate history, the solvent Ottoman state, never bankrupted by war, negotiates from strength. When massive reserves are confirmed in Mosul in 1927 and later across Arabia, the empire demands 50-50 splits or nationalizes production entirely. The Roaring Twenties in Istanbul make the real history look like a depression. While Europe struggles with war debts and the Great Depression, the Ottoman capital becomes a boomtown of Art Deco architecture, modern infrastructure, and glittering wealth. The petrodollars flow not to London and Paris, but to Istanbul, Baghdad, and Damascus. Mustafa Kemal, in this timeline, never becomes a revolutionary republican. Instead, he becomes the Grand Vizier, the prime minister who drags the empire into modernity from within. Ottoman soldiers wear modernized uniforms, but they swear loyalty to the Sultan. Parliament, not a presidential palace, becomes the seat of power. The test of any alternate history is how it handles the Second World War. In 1939, Adolf Hitler desperately courts the Ottoman Empire. He needs their oil to fuel his war machine. He needs a path through the Caucasus to strike at Russia's southern flank. The Axis powers offer alliance, territory, and glory. The Allies, meanwhile, need the Ottomans to block Germany from the Middle East. Britain fears for its empire if Ottoman armies join the Axis. The pressure is immense. But the Ottoman Commonwealth, wealthy and militarily modernized, holds firm. They remain armed neutral, a buffer state of enormous power, like Switzerland with oil wells and a million-man army. In this timeline, Rommel's Africa Corps never receives the fuel it needs. The Desert War ends earlier. The Holocaust, which in our history reached into German Allied territories, is checked by the presence of a strong Ottoman state on the border, one that has no love for Nazi racial theories and protects its Jewish citizens as it has for 5 centuries. The empire emerges from World War II not as a victor or vanquished, but as a broker, a neutral power that mediated between the emerging superpowers. Welcome to the world of 2026. The Ottoman Commonwealth stretches from the Bosporus to the Persian Gulf, from the Mediterranean to the Iranian border. Turkey, Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Kuwait, and the Hejaz form a single federal entity, a superpower of 200 million people. The government is a constitutional monarchy. The Sultan Caliph, descendant of Osman, is a figurehead like the British monarch, providing religious legitimacy and national unity, but wielding no political power. Real authority rests with the Grand Parliament in Istanbul, elected by universal suffrage across the empire's provinces. The economy is staggering. The Commonwealth controls 40 to 50% of the world's proven oil reserves. But unlike the petrostates of our timeline, the wealth has been reinvested in infrastructure, education, and diversification. Istanbul rivals London and New York as a financial center. The empire's universities produce world-class scientists and engineers. The Israel-Palestine question, the defining conflict of our Middle East, never becomes a war. Without the Balfour Declaration, issued in our timeline because Britain needed Jewish support during the war, Jewish immigration to Palestine continues, but is managed by Istanbul. Jewish settlers become a protected millet, a religious community with autonomy but not sovereignty. Tel Aviv grows wealthy and vibrant, but it is a city within an Ottoman province. The partition of 1948, the wars, the occupation, none of it happens. This is not a utopia. Tensions exist between ethnic groups. Kurdish and Armenian populations have achieved autonomy but still navigate a complex federal system. Wahhabi radicals in the interior deserts reject the cosmopolitan culture of Istanbul. The rivalry with Iran is intense. But the streets of Istanbul in 2026 are not marred by suicide bombings. The borders are not drawn by Sykes and Picot, arbitrary lines that condemned generations to conflict. The Middle East is not a chessboard for great powers, but a great power itself. History is not inevitable. The world we know, the borders, the wars, the nations, were built by decisions made in rooms by people under pressure, sometimes getting it wrong. The fall of the Ottoman Empire created a century of Middle Eastern instability. In this alternate timeline, one different decision in 1914 set in motion a world where that instability never came. Could it have happened? We'll never know. But exploring these possibilities reminds us that the future is never fixed. Today's decisions create tomorrow's world. If you enjoyed this journey through alternate history, subscribe to History Reforged, hit the notification bell to never miss an episode, and tell us in the comments, what historical turning point would you like to see explored next? This is History Reforged. Thanks for watching.